He was once the most powerful man in England, yet when he died, his body decayed from within, and no one dared come near. Have you ever wondered, can glory rot a man's soul from the inside out? Subscribe now and uncover this haunting royal tragedy. They called him the most splendid prince in Europe, but behind the gilded doors of the palace, a frightened boy whispered prayers no one heard. George IV was born into silk and silence, trapped in a labyrinth of mirrors where every reflection belonged to someone else. His father, King George III, ruled not only the empire, but the boy's every breath. The old king's voice echoed through the marble halls like the toll of judgment, strict, cold, unbending. At night, servants heard soft footsteps in the nursery. George wasn't sleeping, he was pacing, terrified of the dark that lived inside his father's shadow. There were no friends, no laughter, only lessons and loneliness. His meals were measured, his words rehearsed. Every mistake earned a stare sharp enough to pierce skin. When the crown prince turned 21, they said he had everything: youth, charm, fortune. But what does freedom mean to a man who has never known the world outside his cage? So he built one of his own Carlton Manor, a palace of indulgence and madness. Velvet curtains shut out the daylight, wine flowed like a river of rubies, and laughter from unseen mouths filled the corridors. He surrounded himself with artists, gamblers, and broken souls who called him Your Highness with trembling lips. Yet beneath the roar of violins and crystal glasses, George felt something moving beneath his skin, a quiet decay. Each night, when the music died, he stared into the mirror and saw his father's face. "You are becoming him," a voice whispered. Outside, London celebrated its prince. Inside, he was rotting not from sin, but from hunger, a hunger to be seen, to be loved, to be anything but his father's son. And so, one stormy evening, he made a choice that would curse him for the rest of his life. He met her in the winter fog, Lady Evelyn, a widow veiled in black silk, her voice like smoke curling through candlelight. They said she came from the coast, where storms swallowed entire villages and widows learned to smile at the sea. George didn't care. He saw in her eyes a reflection of his own ruin, beauty built upon secrets. Their affair began as whispers in the chapel of Street Anne, where priests dared not linger. He loved her because she didn't bow. She loved him because he wasn't yet a corpse. When she laughed, he forgot he was a prince. When she touched him, the crown felt like rusted iron. But the church forbade their union. A king to be could not wed without permission. So, in the dead of night, beneath flickering candles and trembling hands, George took her hand and spoke the forbidden vows. The air trembled. The priest's eyes darted to the window as thunder rolled outside. By dawn, she was gone. The bed was cold, the curtains torn, and on the pillow lay a single ring stained with blood. No servant had seen her leave, no carriage had come. The only sound in the palace was the slow dripping of something from the ceiling and George's ragged breath. For 3 days, he didn't eat. He locked himself in the room and muttered her name until his voice broke. Some said they heard 2 voices inside that chamber, one pleading, one mocking. When he finally emerged, he looked years older, his eyes hollow, his hands shaking as though he had touched something unholy. Then came the public marriage, a desperate attempt to erase scandal. The bride, Caroline of Brunswick, arrived from abroad, her laughter coarse, her gaze sharp as knives. On their wedding night, the court rejoiced outside as thunder cracked again above. Inside, George drank until the world blurred. When he awoke, he was lying in a pool of crimson liquid. Wine, perhaps, or something darker. The sheets smelled of iron. From that night on, he swore he could still feel Lady Evelyn's ring burning against his skin. The court pretended to celebrate the match with Caroline of Brunswick, but the music never found its rhythm. She laughed too loudly at the wrong moments. He stared too long at a point just to the left of her face, as if expecting someone else to appear. Their dinners became theater, 2 actors reading lines from different plays. Soon, servants learned to step softly. Caroline filled rooms with perfumes sharp enough to sting, as though aromas could bleach a life. George answered with pageantry, jeweled waistcoats, towering wigs, gloves perfumed to disguise the strange, sweet, sour scent that clung to him. They exchanged notes instead of kindness. They collected allies instead of solace. And beneath every conversation lay a question neither dared ask: who cursed us first, fate or our own choices? On bad nights, the king-to-be would wake and sit upright, convinced he heard Eveline's steps in the corridor. Once, he opened the door and found only a draught, cold as a cellar. He told no one, but the next morning he ordered every mirror shrouded. Caroline mocked him for it, until she glimpsed her reflection, moving a heartbeat too late. After that, she stopped entering his rooms at night. His appetites grew, but food no longer comforted, it only weighed him down. He ate for silence, not for joy. He drank for sleep, not for celebration. The body kept score. His fingers swelled, rings left angry impressions on the skin. Tailors stitched secret panels into his coats. A groan escaped him each time he stood, then a wince, then a hiss. Painted powder hid the pallor, oils disguised the dryness. Layers of silk hid the truth. The crown was becoming heavier because he was becoming weaker. Muscles ached like old debts. Breath came in shallow draughts. He discovered that chairs could feel like anchors and stairways like verdicts. At court, he perfected the grand entrance lamplight, trumpets, a smile that didn't reach the eyes. But alone, he leaned against the wall and waited for the room to stop tilting. In the stillness, the question returned, soft as moth wings at the ear. If power cannot save a man from himself, what can? And when the candles guttered low, he looked at his hands and did not recognize them as his own. When George finally ascended the throne, London glittered like a jeweled serpent, beautiful, coiled, ready to bite. His coronation was a spectacle unmatched in memory. Gold thread banners rippled from the towers, cannons thundered across the Thames, and a million cheers rose like incense to heaven. Yet inside the king's mind, there was only the faint ticking of a hidden clock. They said his crown contained 12,000 diamonds, but he felt their weight as 12,000 thorns pressing into his skull. The silk robe itched, the jeweled sword trembled in his hand. Somewhere beneath the choir's hymn, he heard Eveline's voice again, whispering, "You will not die like other men." He smiled for the portraits, even as blood from an unseen wound traced the edge of his collar. In his reign, George transformed his residence into the marble palace, a maze of mirrors and painted ceilings where night seemed to last longer than day. Every evening, he ordered hundreds of candles lit enough to make the palace glow like a beating heart from miles away. Yet even that brilliance couldn't chase away the shadows that moved when no one looked directly at them. He surrounded himself with artists and dreamers, but they only fed his need for illusion. Paintings of long-dead queens lined the dining hall, their glassy eyes reflecting the flames. At midnight, he walked the corridors alone, touching each portrait as if counting ghosts. "They are loyal," he murmured once when a servant caught him. "They never age, never betray." Politics bored him. The people disgusted him. When famine struck the countryside, he commissioned new chandeliers. When veterans begged for pensions, he ordered another banquet. The kingdom starved while he decorated ceilings with angels he no longer believed in. The courtiers called him the Sun King reborn, but the light that bathed him was the kind that blinds. His laughter echoed through the halls like a spell gone wrong. By the end of his first year, even his most devoted followers avoided his gaze, because sometimes, when he turned too quickly, his reflection did not follow. And every night, before he slept, he pressed a trembling hand to the crown on his bedside table and whispered, "Not yet. Don't take me yet." By his 60th year, the king's robes no longer fit his shape. Servants whispered that the tailor added new seams each month, hiding the truth beneath layers of gold. His flesh ballooned, soft as wax. His legs swelled until he could no longer kneel. Courtiers invented new gestures of respect, bows, performed at a distance, for the odor around His Majesty clung like damp velvet. Doctors prescribed laudanum to soothe his pain. He drank it by the vial, mixing it with port until the world blurred at its edges. He would sit for hours in the grand chamber of Windsor Hall, motionless except for the twitching of his fingers. When asked if he wished to walk, he smiled faintly. "Walk? I have walked too far already." His nights were the worst. Sleep came in fragments, never whole. Sometimes he dreamed of Evelyn standing at the foot of his bed, her veil floating in the dark. Other nights, he saw himself lying there, his own corpse, eyes open, mouth moving, though no breath came. He began to confuse dreams with mornings. Once, he demanded the priest perform last rites. By afternoon, he forgot the reason why. Then came the mirrors. One morning, while dressing, he caught his reflection lagging behind a blink too slow, a grin that lingered after his own mouth closed. Panic struck him like lightning. He screamed for his attendants to cover every mirror in the palace. When they hesitated, he smashed one with his cane, the glass splintering into 1,000 pieces, each holding a tiny version of his face, grimacing, whispering. "Do you not see?" he shouted. "He's in there, the man who waits for me." From that day, no one dared mention reflections in his presence. Curtains stayed drawn, candles dimmed. The king sat, surrounded by darkness, muttering to someone unseen. Once, a young servant reported hearing two voices in the royal chamber, both speaking in perfect rhythm, as if one were echoing the other. And in those echoing halls, George IV, the ruler of a glittering empire, became a prisoner once more. Not of his father, not of the crown, but of himself. For when a man fears his own reflection, where can he still hide? Windsor Hall no longer felt like a palace. It had become a tomb that breathed. The drapes, heavy with dust, never moved unless the king coughed. Each morning began with the same ritual. The scraping of chairs, the murmuring of doctors, the shuffle of servants, bringing trays of food he could no longer stomach. The air reeked of medicine, sweat, and the faint sweetness of decay. George no longer dressed for court. He sat wrapped in embroidered robes, staring at the fireplace, though no fire burned there. The mirrors were gone, the windows shuttered. He spoke rarely, and when he did, it was often to someone the others could not see. "She's waiting," he would whisper, eyes fixed on the far wall. Just beyond the curtain, the servants began to tell stories. At night, they said, the king's chamber filled with whispers, low, rhythmic, like chanting. Some claimed they saw a pale hand draw back the drapes, though no wind stirred them. One maid swore she heard laughter, soft, female, and very close to the king's ear. He had stopped sleeping in bed. "Too soft," he muttered. "The ground feels truer," so they brought him an armchair. There, he dozed in fragments, waking to ask for brandy or to shout for the doctor he had already dismissed hours before. On the evening of June 25th, the storm returned. The hall flickered with lightning, each flash painting his swollen face in ghastly detail, pale skin, cracked lips, eyes sunk deep as wells. He clutched his chest and gasped, "I am dying," though no one believed him. He had said the same so many times before, but this time was different. Blood rose to his throat. He tried to speak, but it came out as a wet cough. "Fetch them," he rasped. "They must see." Then his voice trailed off. For a heartbeat, he looked almost peaceful, as if the crown had finally slipped away. At 3:15 a.m., his head fell forward. The servants froze, unsure whether to touch him. Only the sound of the rain filled the silence. One doctor leaned close, hoping to find breath. Instead, a final bubble of crimson surfaced on the king's lips and burst without a sound. The rain stopped. The storm ended. The most splendid man in England was gone. And somewhere, deep within the palace, a single mirror cracked. When dawn came, Windsor lay in eerie stillness. The rain had washed the courtyard clean, but inside, the air felt thick, sour, almost alive. Physicians entered the royal chamber with faces as pale as the linen sheets. The king's body sat heavy and sunken in the armchair, his eyes half open, staring at something far beyond the room. The autopsy was done in silence. What they found chilled even the hardest of men. Fat clung to every organ like candle wax. The heart was twice its size. The stomach, split from within, had spilled its dark contents into the cavity. His liver, bloated from decades of wine and laudanum, crumbled under the surgeon's blade. They covered the report. "Natural causes," they wrote. Though the attendants knew better, the court whispered of curses and bargains, of a voice that called him through the mirror. Some said the priest who had married him to Lady Evelyn vanished soon after the king's death. Others swore that, on the night of his passing, a woman in black was seen walking the palace corridors, leaving wet footprints that led to nowhere. The funeral was a spectacle of uneasy grandeur. Rain fell again, thin, cold, relentless as the coffin was brought forth. Crafted from mahogany and lined with lead, it took 12 men to lift. As they carried it toward the vault, one of the pallbearers stumbled. A dull crack echoed from within, a sound like wood splitting, or perhaps something else. The men froze, their faces white. In that instant, a faint whisper seemed to drift through the chapel. "Not yet." The bishop continued his prayers, his voice shaking. The coffin was sealed, the stone lowered. The crowd dispersed quickly, eager to escape the chill. Only a few lingered, the faithful, the curious, the fearful. When night returned, thunder rolled once more across the countryside. In the great hall of Windsor, a guard swore he heard footsteps pacing behind the locked doors of the royal chamber. He called out no answer, yet from within came the soft scrape of a chair against the floorboards, followed by a sigh, the kind a man gives when standing from long sleep. And in that quiet, the crown upon the empty throne gave a faint, metallic ring. They said the curse had ended with his death, but those who served long enough knew better. The king still walks only now. He no longer casts a reflection.